Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Paper Doll Chronicles here on Painting in Your PJs with Minette. I am Dr. Minette Riordan, the founder of Mindful Patterns, and I'm really committed to supporting midlife women on their journey of self-discovery and getting really curious about how playful can we make this journey? How can we use art as a powerful and playful way in? I deeply believe that we can do our transformational work without it always having to be a dark night of the soul, especially when you reach a certain age and stage and you've done therapy and you've done coaching and you've done all the self-help books and you've read everything, and yet we still have the opportunity to get closer to our purpose, to really find our calling in the world, to look for new ways, means, and opportunities to share our joy with others. And the Paper Doll Chronicles this year are part of me sharing my joy of both paper dolls and personal growth out in the world. Good morning, Tori. Thank you for being here live this morning. And I am pretty passionate about animals. I'm going to tell you a little story about a couple of ways that has come out to play or sort of come to play in some surprising perspectives throughout my lifetime. Good morning, Blanca. Good to see you. So, as a kid, we lived on a couple of acres outside of San Antonio, Texas, and we had a lot of animals. At that point in time when my parents were married, we had kennels. They raised German short-haired pointers. I have fun pictures of my brother and I literally sitting under a tree, just covered in puppies. It was a very joyful time. We had a wonderful horse named Blackie, who really became my horse, and we had goats at one point. I had rabbits. I think I had parakeets. Eventually, I had a cat. So I grew up surrounded by animals, and animals have always been a huge part of my life. My dad and my grandfather made merry-go-rounds. Good evening, Teddy. Happy belated birthday, my friend. Made merry-go-rounds. So, there were merry-go-round horses, another form of animals. So it seemed like animals were around us all the time. And then when I was 25, my mother gifted me a reading at the time I was living in Austin, Texas, with a local psychic. And I had never done anything like that. And I'm like, whatever, it's going to be fun. It's going to be curious. And she said a couple of things that I'm starting to see coming into fruition now that were unexpected. So at the time, I was working on my master's in Latin American Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. And this woman was so lovely. And one of the questions she asked me like 4 times, she's like, "Are you sure you don't have a career planned with animals?" And I just kind of laughed and I said, "No, I'm on my path to being an academic and to being a teacher." And she's like, "I keep seeing you surrounded by animals." And it made me think about growing up with all of these animals. I've always had animals in my life. This is, one of the very few times when we don't have any pets at the moment. And yet now, sitting here in my studio, if you could see the long wall in my studio, I'm surrounded by all the animals that I painted. It's one of my personal projects and joys is painting animals. I spoke at a conference last year and was asked to do this fun interactive activity where I drew like great big, I don't know, 3x5 or 4x6 animal drawings that people would go to the different animals and talk about how am I like that animal or not like that animal. So I'm standing on a stage in front of 150 women, and the women are standing around the room holding up my animal drawings. And so it was 2 moments of like reconnecting to that story of my childhood and then in my 20s, of seeing this through line of my passion for animals come through in so many different ways. In fact, for the second time in about 5 years, I'm teaching my spirit animal painting retreat here in my studio in May. It's completely sold out and I cannot wait. It's going to be an amazing experience. Like, there is just those moments in time where we start to really connect the dots. in ways that we haven't before. And I wouldn't necessarily have connected those dots if it weren't for my personal art practice. It's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this practice. And I've been working on kind of behind the scenes some paper doll animals because the theme seems really important. And my intention for this month is to really dig in a little bit to different inner child archetypes. Well, my inner child needs animals. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and zoom back out from my teaching up close yesterday, and we are going to play with creating some paper doll animals. So last week, I worked on creating this sweet little pocket that turned into a secret garden for this little special someone that represented my inner nature child, that lover of nature, that little girl who just loved and needed to be outside. And I added the pocket and I added a little closure in here because it felt like it was important to have this little secret garden. And I don't think this is finished yet, but I will keep working on it. But as I was looking back over this, I'm like, oh, what's missing are her animals. She really needs some animals. So I have added a butterfly in here. This was a cutout piece of vellum paper, but I'm like, she needs some animals. And when I was with my mom last week, I had fun starting to work on my ideas for some paper doll animals. I loved this little lion dude, and I will be creating some templates. And for those of you that are on the Paper Doll Chronicles email list, I will be adding those templates as a bonus soon, hopefully early next week. And I had fun. I stitched a button on here. You can see the texture. There's some lovely slow stitching, and I just colored this with paint markers. The kitty cat was so fun, and I've used brads on different parts of these, so their parts are movable. And this one really represented that inner ballerina that I've talked about her before, that aspect of myself that was told I was too chubby to be a ballerina when I was 6 and I should, focus on other activities. But I loved how she came together with her sparkly tutu. And if you see pictures of me as a small child, I had chubby knees and chubby cheeks. And so this reminded me both of my love of animals and that inner little happy, dancing, angelic, chubby child. And so she's going to get, I think, her own story in the book. Good morning, Yvonne. And then this one, I was getting a little, into fantasy and playing with how can we move these around. I love when their heads tilt because then they kind of take on a whole different personality. So when I started thinking about this little journal booklet for my inner child that I'm working on, I thought about my childhood animals, which were lots of dogs of different kinds, mostly German short-haired pointers, and also some German shepherds. When my mom and stepdad got married, he came with 2 beautiful German shepherds, and so we always had dogs. My stepmom and dad, when they got married, she had a Irish setter, right? So like animals were just everywhere, and especially dogs. So I created these using Midjourney, which I've been having fun with, and then I'm going to take these and look at how can I use these as templates to create my own sort of inner child animal spirits, if you will, right? Because I felt like I needed those animals to come to play. Also some cute little kitty cats because I love all animals, but I in particular have a love of cats. And so I am going to see what I can do to create some simple templates for these animals. And I was thinking about size, and I think this might be a little smaller than I want it to be, but I definitely want to create one of these little funny pointers And this is just some plain sulfite paper, so it's not fancy paper. Is that one sheet? It is thick. And we're going to have a little drawing practice. And so you can kind of just grab a piece of paper and draw along with me, and I'll show you how I go from one of these designs to creating. Do I want it to be that small? It's like not quite big enough, but it's probably big enough for. Okay, so we're going to draw it on this bigger sheet of paper here. And what I love about having an image to look at, and I was really drawn to this one, I think I was drawn to the colors and the patterns, but I'm thinking about this as a paper doll, not as a whole drawing. So I've been practicing, which part is the doll, which part is, on the card, on the diagonal, almost. It almost fits on there, but you'll see when I start to draw the parts, and I may do the parts on the note cards just because it's a little thicker. But when I start, I'm going to start with the body. I'm going to give myself some room. And we are by no means going for perfection here. When I think about German short-haired pointers, when I was growing up, they always docked their tails. They don't tend to do that anymore, so pointers have kind of long tails. So this piece here would have a brad, right? So I want to start to think about how is this all going to come together? And I'm thinking that body is too long. And what I'm loving about this process is it's also helping me to practice my drawing skills. And it's helping me to see different proportions of the animal. I'm letting this be very, very sketchy. So this leg back here would also have a brad in it. And I crack up every time I say the word because, as many of you know, my husband's name is Brad. And I love that I'm playing with brads all the time these days. So there we have one leg. And on some of these, I've even been making the leg all one piece. And that other leg is a little bit further behind there. And I'm thinking that this could all just be one piece, and that would be sort of tucked behind. Make it a little easier to create. That's what I did on this one. Rather than having a whole bunch of different legs, have two legs together. And it usually takes me kind of a couple of tries to get these down just like I want them. I'm not trying to make this realistic. Remember, this is a whimsical folk art style. And folk art traditionally is made by artists like myself who don't have any formal training in art. The work tends to be very two-dimensional, and it tends to be very, very simple. So we want those legs to be about the same size. And again, we can kind of think about those two legs as one piece there. And the head always feels like the hardest part. And German short-haired pointers are beautiful dogs, and they have these funny, very pointy heads. And they have beautiful, long, silky ears. And because I'm making this into a doll, I can always exaggerate some of the sizes Like maybe it needs to have a bigger head. And it's going to have part of the neck, and there needs to be some overlap here for attaching the head. I couldn't figure out what I was hearing. My husband is upstairs singing. And I love this big, long, silky ear. And then, we've got the eye over here. So all of a sudden we start to think about that neck looks very long, but it's going to end up being collapsed, right? A little bit. And they also have these deep chests. So my dad hunted with these dogs. I grew up in Texas, so that was pretty common, where they had field trials and would take the dogs out. And then my mom showed dogs, so very much like you would see at the American Kennel Club type shows. And I had a dog, a German Shepherd Pointer named Star, that I showed at one point. But we had one dog named Duke. Okay, he's looking more like a dachshund here than a short hair, but he is pretty fun and playful, which is what I'm going for. And I did show Star. I think I got a third place ribbon, if I remember correctly. But we had one dog. His name was Dirk. He had a really long name with all these initials after his name. And he had so many awards and trophies. And he was also an amazing pet, and he was so smart. He would go fetch the newspaper every morning, and he loved to play with my brother and I. So, we're thinking about reconnecting to those aspects of childhood that were delightful. It's easy to get caught up spending a lot of time in the aspects of our lives that were painful, because there were plenty of them. My parents getting divorced being, an example of that. All right. Let's see. He's actually got a little bit thicker neck there. And if you ask any of the four of us in my family, we still talk about what an amazing dog he was. And this is where the disconnect is. He actually has kind of a slender body here. All right, so here I have this fun template and this idea for this dog. So I am going to cut him out. He's going to be big for my little art journal I'm working on, but that's okay. So once I have the idea for the shapes, it becomes a lot easier. And when I cut it out, then I also often see places where it needs to change. That shape needs to change. So using your scissors as a form of seeing. And I'm curious who else has amazing memories of animals in their childhood. Were animals important? So my husband didn't grow up with any animals. And so it's definitely been a thing for us in our almost 30 years of marriage for him to learn how to live with animals. And yes, I cut his tail off. You'll see why in a minute. And I'm going to redraw his body. So the first part of this is like how we start to make our own paper doll patterns. And this would be true if you were making a pattern for a human doll or for any kind of fun doll, we kind of got to start to look at the pieces individually as well as all together. And then I'll redraw the body on a separate piece of paper. Oh, I love that, Marion, and hello. Happy to have you here this morning. And my brother had this hilarious German short-haired pointer. That leg is not right. I might redraw that one. Named Sadie. And Sadie, so German short-haired pointers are known for, oh, that's that one. That's fine. For their agility and their gracefulness. And he was living in downtown Dallas in this cool loft place. Or no, maybe he was in a rental house at this point, I guess. And Sadie, when he was at work, would literally hop up to the very top of the fence and tiptoe right along the very top of the fence and then just jump out and go on walkabout. And his neighbors were upset and thought he wasn't feeding the dog or taking care of the dog. But no, she was just an escape artist and caused him a lot of grief because she did not like to be trapped in the yard. She liked to go on walkabout. Now I can decide if these parts are kind of the right shape. Now we can kind of see them in their individual parts and how they're going to look if they're moving around and if they have enough overlap. And I got to bring the tail back again. And I'm going to look at that head again. So I think maybe the top of the head is a little too tall. And the neck probably needs to be a little bit longer so those pieces can overlap and still have her neck be long enough. So I know now that I'm cutting the parts apart, right? Freddie, Spot, and Bernie, Sweet Daisy May, pets and animals around you all your life, except now while living in Germany with a spouse. Right. Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at, Teddy. Yeah. If you've never had pets, it's a thing, right? To think about how do we learn to live with them if we've never lived with them. Okay. Feels like a nice, long, fun, curly tail. Me too, and I always feel lucky in my neighborhood. Okay, I need some white space here. I feel lucky in my neighborhood when I go for a walk. I'm the person who always stops and says hello to all the neighborhood dogs. And I couldn't tell you the people's names, but I usually know all the dogs' names. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to trace out the different pieces. And there's my tail. I could even make that ear a separate piece if I wanted that ear to kind of move around, but now I can create an actual template that is a little more repeatable from these pieces. And I'm trying to decide if I want to do this. I think I'm just going to do it on the sulfite paper. And then these will be the pieces that I will color and cut out. I'm going to make that neck just a little bit longer so I have lots of room for overlap. Draw back the full body where I cut off the legs and other parts. Remembering that, this is going to get filled in here by the legs, except this needs to probably go around like this. Thank goodness for erasers. I have no idea who invented rubber erasers and then all the erasers that came after, but I feel a lot of gratitude for erasers. Okay, legs. And I'm actually going to paint this before I cut it out and put it together, because I found when you're making dolls this way, it can be much easier to sort of see all of it and work with it when they are all on one page. I'm going to even draw an extra tail here, and then I will keep my individual parts to make a master template of the doll. And I'm going to come back over here and draw that ear in, kind of draw that nose in, draw a cute little eye in there. And we'll start to give this pup some personality. And sometimes I have supplies in my stash that I forget that I have. Does that happen to anybody else? I have this beautiful, gorgeous pencil bag that my friend Mary Rose Feldman makes and sells, and her business is The Sentimental Gift. She's also an amazing Zentangle teacher. Oh, I have watercolors in here too. And I was cleaning out the studio and came across these Sharpie acrylic paint markers, which are fabulous kind of, intro to paint markers. I also have some different black drawing pens in here. And when I was looking to take some simple supplies with me up to my mom's house, these popped out. And I'd forgotten how much I like working with them. So this says they're a brush tip. Some of them are thick, some of them are thin. And I'm feeling like I want to maybe just outline some of the parts. And if you've ever seen a German short-haired pointer, they are very speckledy, lots of spots, but they also usually tend to have sort of big patches of color. So I want to maybe capture some of those fun patches and some of the speckles. But I also want to add my whimsical folk art flair here. With lots of bright colors and patterns. So we'll see how we can combine all of that. There's something so mindful about just outlining shapes. I think it reminds me of Zentangle. It reminds me of also Neurographica. And I am definitely feeling that pull this morning to some purple and some yellow and maybe some of a couple of different blues. Not feeling pinky. And I have small tips and fat tips here, and maybe a little spot of orange. We'll just see where we get to. And I'm just going to start coming in and laying in some color. If you've never worked on sulfite paper before, it's actually a really fun paper to work on. I learned about it from Wendy Solganic years ago from Willa Wanders. And it's very inexpensive. It's great for journal making, but it's also great for practicing on. This is 9 by 12. It's thicker and nicer than just printer paper. Continuing with kind of that spot idea. Don't want it to start looking like a Dalmatian, another type of pointer. And I love these markers because they are acrylic paint, so as they dry, I will be able to go in and add layers over the top of them. And again, in my head, I'm thinking this needs to be, very playful and whimsical. I'm not going to see all of the leg here because that's going to get tucked behind the body, so I'm not too worried. Same here, we want to just see the legs and the feet. And I decided on the paint markers because the other thing that I loved as a kid, as we're thinking about this joyful inner child, was I loved to color. All the crayons, the giant box, the 64 with the sharpener in the back was like my favorite thing. Let's see, is there one of these? It's a fine liner. I had lots of coloring books. So keeping our supplies simple is also great when we're experimenting or trying new things. And to not be afraid to try, right? To experiment. So when I decided to do this morning, I had, kind of a plan in place, but not a well-formed plan. I just knew I was going to make some paper doll animals. I knew I wanted to make a dog and maybe a cat. And I picked one simple supply to experiment with. When I was at my mom's, I used some handmade paper and I worked on this dark paper. It was a fun pack of paper I found at the dollar store up by her house, and I loved how the colors came out much muted because the colors went on over this dark blue, whereas this one was over this beige color. And I'm just noticing how bright these colors are going now over just this white paper. So my pup here is going to end up being very bright and vibrant and perfectly imperfect. And I really enjoyed adding the slow stitching to these as well, which probably, I don't know, it would probably work on this sulfite paper, but this was more like a cardstock, which is really nice for adding stitching to, but really having fun and expanding out where's my body here? what you're using to decorate your different paper dolls with. So I want to just make sure what I'm going to see there. Yeah, I think I'm good. May need to add some more color there. And now I'm just going to start to add patterns and designs. Again, just keeping it whimsical and joyful. Give him some little feet here. We lived in Texas and it would get really hot in the summer, and I was drawing these little lines on here, and it made me think about as a kid, it would put my brother and I into fits of giggles because the dogs would wear shoes because the cement in the kennels would get so hot that it would be really hard on the pads of their feet. So they had these little rubber booties that they had to wear, which I don't know that the dogs really loved those rubber booties very much. So loving the colors of these Sharpie markers, and you can get these anywhere. They're one of the most affordable acrylic pens to, like, if you're new to playing with acrylic paint markers, they're a great starter set or kind of a everyday set. You grew up with a parrot. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Did he talk, Blanca? Many dogs and cats, a chicken, 3 small dogs and 2 cats. Yes, our dolls need pets, totally, right? Like to really represent who we are. At least some of us, our dolls will need their pets. And I'm just kind of having fun, just as if I were treating this kind of like an art journal page, that I was having fun adding different lines and marks. This is where I continue to let go of needing this to look like anything other than a playful, whimsical dog. 2 dogs, 2 cats, 3 chickens. Yeah, lots of animals. Just letting him be playful. And this is the part that to me is he called your name and he's saying opera. That is amazing, Blanca. Where I really just can kind of get into that zone of nostalgia, of memories. Be in that mindful space of just playful mark making. And I mentioned at the beginning, I will share out some of these templates and patterns that I'm creating, and I highly encourage you to also create your own. Maybe even find a photograph of a beloved animal and use it as a template to create your own whimsical paper doll animals. And these are layering pretty nicely. Like I can see a little bit of that purple bleeding through the white. Again, just keeping the patterns on this one pretty simple for the moment. I can always go back and add more. So the white definitely is bleeding into the yellow. It's showing up on the screen because it is shiny while it's wet, but on my end, maybe not standing out quite as much as I would like. I also really love the brush tips because they make a really nice petal shape when you press with them on the side. And I love when I rediscover something in my studio that has sat unused for a long time. It's like having a new toy again, or finding a long lost toy. And I could literally sit here for days adding silly bird, your mom loved music. Oh, Tori, hoping, yeah, it's hard. When you lose one, it's so hard to know when to replace one. And I'm glad you've been playing with AI. That's awesome. It's very fun. Maybe some little speckles on his feet. And I'm curious to see what he's going to look like. And I keep saying he because I'm thinking about our dog Dirk, right? And how this whimsical little critter here kind of becomes a placeholder. We also, when I was really little, we had a Doberman pinscher. I think my mom had Dobermans and showed Dobermans for a while. Her name was Liebchen. And there's fun pictures of me like literally lying on top of her. And mom said she was so good with me that one time as a little toddler, I bit her ear really hard and she just laid there and let me. Okay, that was what it needed, was a little more fun color here. And you can never have too many dots. Okay, I am not loving the white, so we're just gonna get rid of that white. Better. All right, making sure I bring that orange throughout the whole design to just make those colors all feel like they're actually part of the same design. And I'm going to keep this one, I keep dragging my hand through the paint, not a surprise. Keep this one pretty simple. I'm going to cut it out and put it together. Oh, that's crazy, Teddy. So my grandparents, they're best friends, raised dogs of all kinds, and I think they had like a grooming place. I'm trying to remember if he was actually a vet, but I think it was through them that at one point she had Dobermans, at one point she had Dachshunds, and everybody in the family had dogs growing up. My Aunt Shelley and Uncle Jim had Dalmatians, and my uncle always had, my aunt and uncle, so he always had like a big lab or a retriever of some kind. And then my aunt had a series of tiny little teacup poodles. So they always had a big one and a little one. And my favorite aunt had a super fun little dachshund named Broomhilda after the cartoon. And she was a little love bug, but she was also trouble. She loved chewing gum. And you could not leave, like my cousin Tina one time left chewing gum in her purse on the floor in her bedroom, and Hilda went in there and found all of that chewing gum and ate it, which I don't think is very good for a little dog's digestion. But she was a character. Lovely to just have that walk through memories of those beloved moments, right? And oftentimes when childhood was tough, our animals were often our solace. They definitely were beacons of unconditional love. Let me make that just a little bit longer, just in case. And so they often hold a very important place, right, in our childhood. Oh, so cute. Okay, I'm happy. Little playfulness this morning. Had one of my closest friends here visiting for the last 4 or 5 days, and she was up and off to the airport early this morning. She lives in New Jersey, so I'm always sad to see her go. So it's nice to come in and have a little playtime with all of you this morning. And there's kind of the fun mystery here also of painting the parts individually and then putting it all together and see what happens when it all gets put together. A little bit of magic. What? Teddy? That's crazy. It really is a small world. Did I know that you lived in San Antonio in the early 60s? That would be crazy if it was the same family that you got your Doberman from. I still remember the family name. Like I said, they were my grandparents' closest friends, and I think my mom spent a lot of time with them as well. That is wild. Okay, so let's put this little pup together here. So I'm going to put both the pieces together to, of course he could talk, right? Of course he could talk, Marion. Yes, and they were amazing listeners. Let's see. I'm going to hold both of these pieces and poke a hole with my awl. You could also do that with a pair of scissors so that I get the holes lined up for where I want my brads to go. And now I can sit with this puppy and see if I want to add anything else to it, if I want to add some slow stitching. What I love about adding the stitching to the paper is it creates texture, right? And the animals seem like they need some texture. So one of the things I want to be working on is also, and maybe we'll do that, maybe that'll be my focus in April, is that, and the legs are pretty long. Maybe they need to go up over there. Is working with felt. So I bought some felt to play with to create some felt style paper dolls to be able to stitch them together. Saber, what a great name. All right, so this is where I can kind of also look at the shape here. Get that lined up. Teddy and I have lived a lot of the same places. Like the more we talked about it, we realized we had lived many of the same places. And now we have dogs in common too. Not a surprise, my friend. Lancelot, I love it. All right, big happy tail up there. Okay, I'm feeling like his neck is a little too long, so I might redo that neck a little bit. And I could have done this all as one piece, but I love having the movable parts. It definitely feels a little more paper doll like. Can curl that tail. He can tilt his head. You know how dogs love to look up at things. Okay, so these feel maybe not long enough. These feel maybe a little bit too long, but he's pretty darn cute here. Okay, his neck is definitely too long. And I can't wait to have a whole sort of just fun growing collection of animal paper dolls. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I'm thinking about making some of them into garlands that I can string around the studio for some, that's better, for some play and fun. All right, and there I have my fun little paper doll. Okay. My inner perfectionist is having a little bit of a hissy fit at the moment, which is not usually quite so true for me. But this morning, it's like proportions matter. You know how when you're a kid and you get frustrated because it doesn't look just right? Well, that's like my inner child is like, no, it's not right. It needs to be right. And there we have a very simple, cute little puppy who kind of represents all of the dogs that I grew up with. And I remember when I was first working on soul collage that I have an animal card that I love that I still have that is a small child just surrounded everywhere by dogs. All these different pictures of dogs. And so it feels important that we take some time. And maybe for you, it wasn't a dog, maybe it was a cat, or like Blanca said, a parrot, or maybe it was a beloved stuffed animal. Maybe you didn't grow up with animals. My daughter grew up in the time of My Little Pony, so we had a lot of little ponies around. I definitely need to make a horse to represent my beloved horse Blackie. Yep, see, he just, he's going to keep morphing and changing and finding his own personality here. Definitely like the little bit of the white head. Okay, he has a funny little stubby body, but he feels very fun. His tail also feels like it needs to move, but that's, the beauty of making these kind of paper dolls is you just keep playing with them till you get them where you want them. And I'm trying to avoid having too many holes in it, especially in this thinner paper. these little tiny brads. There we go. Okay. So now his little legs can move, his little tail moves, his little head can move. I think it would be fun to even make that ear move. And if this were my dog Dirk, hi Karen, he would have a stick in his mouth, like he would perpetually carry around like sticks that were 4 times as long as his body, and he always seemed to manage to pick them up right in the middle. He was definitely a retriever. We did a paper doll animal to represent our childhood animal, and when I looked at my little book I'm making, I realized that my little inner nature child, where is she? Needed some company. So when I think about the little girl that I was, and her constant companions were animals. So, okay, definitely like cardstock better because it makes it lie flat. And Karen, I showed some of the other fun, whimsical animals that I have been working on creating and having a lot of fun with. So I feel a whole zoo coming. I always loved going to the zoo as well. But today was really about continuing to really honor that joyful childhood memory of beloved family pets and what an important part of my life they were. I looked at this journal, this little booklet as I was finishing it up, and it definitely felt like it needed some friends. So it's a little big to fit into the journal, so I will probably just attach an envelope or when I'm not playing with it, they can fold all up. So that's the other beauty of your dolls. We can just fold him up so he gets to stay and hang out in the secret garden. And she's going to come back to her pocket on the cover. And now she has this wonderful little secret special place. Makes me think of the book, The Secret Garden, one of my favorites. And Mary would go to the garden. I have my little birds show me the way to the secret garden, and there she met, oh, and I'm forgetting his name right now, but the character in the book who brought all the animals, the little fox. So super fun, something different to think about, that your paper dolls don't all have to be people, but to have some fun with. Me too, love all these traveling companions, but to have some fun with just reimagining what else is possible, or even imagining yourself as an animal, like my sweet little inner princess ballerina here with the kitty cat. So I hope you enjoyed looking at how to create your own paper doll animal template today. It was certainly fun for me to create. I can't wait to make some more of these, and I will be sharing some of these templates in the Paper Doll Chronicles email list in the next week or so, in case you would like to have the templates already done for you. So if you're not on that email list, yes, Karen, our clocks did go forward on Sunday. I know, silly time change. And the link to join the email list is in the description of the video. And we use simply paper today, and then these wonderful Sharpie creative markers that are inexpensive, more affordable acrylic paint markers that I have really enjoyed playing with. All of these were created with the acrylic paint markers. This one's actually all fabric, right? So much fun, and great to be with you all today. And I will see you guys all next week, and we're going to get back to more inner child dolls in our art journals. So I will be making a new spread, in my art journal and bringing in some of the other dolls that I've already made. Have a beautiful rest of your week. Thanks for being here live. Thanks for catching the replay. I'm Dr. Minette Riordan, and this is Painting in Your PJs with Minette. Bye, everybody.